I'm a focusing oriented therapist, and I also teach focusing to therapists, coaches, and all kinds of mental health and body workers. In this following video, I work with Rebecca, who very generously volunteered to do this session for teaching purposes, and so she's kindly allowed me to share this video. So Rebecca's had therapy before, but she hasn't experienced focusing, so it's a good session for that reason. And it's also an example of a therapeutic focusing conversation. Gene Gendlin, the father of focusing, was a psychotherapist himself and regularly used focusing conversations in his sessions. So he called this style of focusing dipping in rather than spending time or going inside, which is where focusing is used as a more specific practice of guiding someone inside and staying there, rather than it being kind of interwoven as part of a therapeutic dialogue. And of course, being able to use both styles is important because every client is different. So in this session with Rebecca and I do a zigzag where we go from explicit thinking, what we call regular consciousness, to what Gene called the implicit, which some people call the unconscious or semi-conscious. The analogy of an iceberg fits really well here. The very small tip is our regular everyday thinking, which actually in science has proved counts for 5% or less of our actual processing power. The other 95% is under that waterline in the implicit. And it's at the border zone between the two, the explicit and the implicit, where we often find a vague, subtle feeling sense of our living. And that this feeling sense, it's not our louder emotions of happy, sad, mad. It's quieter and it lives just beneath these bigger emotions. But emotions can be a doorway to it. So as we dip in and sense into our feeling sense, and then symbolize with words, images, metaphors, what we feel there, a whole datum comes fully digested from that 95% into our consciousness. And as it does so, it creates a forward movement and a shift that shifts the all of us. So each time we symbolize what we find in our felt sense, another shift comes, some big, some small, and as we do so, realizations come. So we're not concentrating on solving problems, but problems get solved as a result of this kind of holistic life forward movement, which is where the new comes from the underneath, from our 95%. So in this session with Rebecca, I use a number of focusing skills to facilitate this touching into the felt sense and then making it a something and opening it and integrating it. I include many different types of reflection, making a something, finding the right distance. I use what I call invitations, avenues into the felt sense, asking into and shift questions, as well as expressive relating, which is I speak from my own felt sense of me with Rebecca, my felt sense of Rebecca, and the felt sense of our relationship. These moves are all in the service of facilitating the natural life forward movement for a client, and they can be grouped into particular ways of working in this zigzag. So first we point to where we feel the felt sense peaking up, we make it into a something where it's emerging, we make a package, and then we open the package. So pointing, making a something, opening the package. Each of these movements bring a life forward movement. And I teach each one of these skills sequentially, building one on the other in very comprehensively in my 2-year certification program. Many thanks again to Rebecca for being so generous in allowing us to learn from her session.
I want to enjoy more and and not feel I guess it feels like weighty right now.
Just weighty right now, just like at this phase of life, or like when?
Yeah, it feels. I mean, I used to be more sort of optimistic, and just being able to, sort of get through things or push through things. And I just realized my optimism is just not, I can't like sort of turn, it's not there as much. And I think, I can look at all sort of the circumstances of what's going on in the world and my age and that kind of thing, but I'm also really trying to see, if there's a deeper level that I can be more joyful,
Yeah, and when you say that, there's a deeper level where I can be more joyful. What comes there? What comes here?
A little bit of a weight.
Yeah, right. I can sense some of that. Yeah. So it's a little bit of a weight, and it's kind of like here, or like.
Yeah, it's here, and then it kind of swings around to the back part of my ribs, the whole sort of mid torso.
So it kind of goes all the way around. Right?
Yeah, and even in the sort of the solar plexus bit too.
And there's like an emotion that comes there. There's like a feeling that comes there.
Yeah.
But what's that like? That feels like a whole something.
Well, that it starts there and maybe radiates out or around. And I don't know, just something came to mind when I was sort of thinking and feeling about it, feeling it, like it had been sort of left behind and not, nurtured or given space for.
Something about it being left behind and not given space or not being nurtured. And there feels something so nurturing in you actually saying that. There feels like there's something lovely and a tenderness in that, noticing that. So something that got left behind, that comes there.
I mean, I think, conceptually there's, and memory of when my stepdad took his life, my mom I was staying with some cousins so I could go to school. And my little sister was with her and my grandparents, so I was sort of separated during this whole huge trauma from them. And she'd come to speak to me, and I had already found out about it through my cousins, and the principal had taken me home from school. And I just remember I think obviously she was in shock, but I remember she just left me there. And I just remember her leaving and thinking, oh my God, I've lost my whole family. And being left behind. And I'm wondering if part of this is sort of, I'm leaving myself behind. Now, like yeah.
Right, so something about that whole memory is there's that like maybe a resonance with maybe I'm leaving myself behind, just like I felt left behind back then. But what's that resonance like as you've got a foot in both places?
I don't know. I'm sort of thinking like that what that meant from a memory which is very specific to me and painful for me. And maybe feeling that I sort of raced ahead in many ways in my life, trying not to leave myself behind, but maybe in fact I have, or a part of me, that sort of vulnerable part.
So that there may be like a racing ahead in life to try not to leave yourself behind, but it actually did leave yourself behind, but you were trying not to. You were trying to not to avoid that, but not let that happen. And that memory is still very painful. That was a big thing that happened back there.
Yeah, yeah. And I think part of this too is, which, you know, I've spoken to with my mom, is the we didn't grieve together. And
right.
Part of this is avoiding grief in some way. And I remember having a conversation with my mom and about that, actually quite a few. And she had lost her mother when she was 16 to cancer, and then shortly thereafter her grandmother, and they were the closest people to her in her life. And when she just cried her eyes out, and she just decided, she promised herself she would never cry again. And so when my baby sister died, when my dad died, when some issues happened with my sister, it was never, we didn't grieve together. And so it was yeah.
That you didn't grieve together, that you didn't have that experience together, and that wasn't allowed in some way, in some kind of implicit way.
Yeah.
As well, that wasn't okay, or that wasn't allowed.
And I didn't, I think at the time when I was little or younger, I didn't understand that until she told me later.
Right.
You know, this is the, and yeah.
Right, and I just want to check something with you. There's something about that feels deep. There are many things that happened that were really painful in your mum's life and in both of your lives. You never got to grieve together, and it just, implicitly, it wasn't allowed. There was something too scary or too something about it that wasn't even verbalized. It made sense later. But
Right.
And it just feels like there's something deep about that.
Yeah. I think it's colored a lot of the way I deal with loss or change or big changes. And perhaps things that are difficult emotionally.
So in that way that it's coloured deep loss, I'm wondering what comes as you say it. It kind of feels like something comes inside as you say that.
Yeah, I just feel it. Yeah.
Yeah, what's that like? Because I get a sense of that too. As you're feeling that, like it's never been allowed before. And there's something that you're opening up here about, it's never been allowed. And there's a way I kind of get left behind, or part of me gets left behind. And it's like you're opening that now, or something's happening there. That feels like we're both kind of with it at the moment. It feels like it's like right here. And I'm wondering, it's an unknown kind of thing.
It is. And it's interesting because it felt it didn't feel stuck right then. It sort of felt sort of elongated a little bit.
So it elongated a little bit there.
Yeah.
And it kind of shifted a little bit. What's your sense of that shift as it elongated?
I'm not sure. It just felt a little bit different.
Yeah.
Instead of sort of pooled here, it just felt like it shifted longer. not so dense. I just got this image of cooking when the sauce gets too thick and you have to add water
Right,
to
yeah,
sort of
yeah,
like
yeah.
loosen it up. That's what sort of
It
came to
feels
mind.
like that.
Yeah.
You can just feel that more space, like more space between the molecules, or there's something like more spacious, and the substance of it has changed, become a little lighter. It's kind of interesting. So the elongating, does it go deeper? What happens in that elongating?
I don't know. It just felt like it shifted. It was definitely longer in terms of how I feel it in my body. Yeah.
I'm just wondering if something about you just being like present with it in this way, and like naming that you were never able to grieve with your mum, and that just wasn't kind of allowed, just suddenly, I mean, it just kind of brought more space to that whole thing somehow. Suddenly like a light went on in that room, or you know, something's more permissible, or more in the light, or more in something, I'm not quite sure.
Yeah. And I mean, it feels a little newish. I think it's interesting because I'm doing this meditation course I told you about at the Insight Meditation Center, and something's been happening, I guess, with sort of all these different meditations that I do, but particularly in this one, about some things that I think are starting to shift and maybe add to this, is that some of it is, you know, as you mentioned, sort of giving space for, sometimes if I get distracted in my meditation, you're like, oh man, my mind was just like going everywhere. And you're a little hard on yourself, or at least I am, or, you know, and sometimes I just come back. Sometimes but I've sort of noticed like, no. And I sort of push away, and I'm beginning to say, okay, just give space for that. Whatever that was, it came up.
Right.
It came up. Just, you know, it's you don't have to push it away. Just allow space, and it's really helped to give space for sort of the craziness, and that's okay. And there was something that happened recently that the teacher said in the meditation, you know, let awareness hold you. And there was something about that really resonated with me, because it felt safe but also very freeing. And I've had these glimpses before in my meditations, very freeing, but this felt different. And I got sort of this visual of like all these people in my life, and other people I don't know, just humanity, I guess. And suddenly, instead of them as other, it was sort of this other, oh, they're part of the awareness too. And that it sort of held, like I was like, oh, it's okay, we're, you know, and it was just this feeling of, it was really wonderful.
Beautiful.
So a part of that, I think, is maybe this excavating is a
right
is letting it. I don't have to do anything with it. It can just be held by awareness.
Right. Yeah. And there's something so big about that, being held by awareness, and so heart-centered and so heartful. Is what it's how it's touching me. It's just like really beautiful. So let's just touch in here again, like with all of that kind of shift that you had recently about that bringing, letting awareness hold it with everything that's coming up. How is that here?
There's sort of still the emotion, like I feel it,
Yeah, what's that emotion like?
I mean, it's I guess sadness and grief, and I guess part of this is feeling that, because the second part was interesting, that John the teacher said, he said, let awareness hold you, like a mother holds their child. And for me, that's sort of the, I needed that, and didn't, at that time, didn't get it. And so now, I mean, that shifted a bit with my mom, for sure. But I guess part of this is giving that to myself. But I guess in the past, like, it felt more heavy because I'm like, how do I do this? But this feels lighter, the awareness. Like I can, how they do those things where you fall back into people's, and you sort of trust it. Yeah. So I think maybe that's where I am, is in that feeling that I can begin to trust that.
Yeah, and you're really kind of evoking it too. I mean, I can really kind of sense that in like, because it feels like it's like our awareness holding it and the bigger awareness holding it too. There's something very beautiful and tender and big, and very holding at the same time. It feels like it's got all of those kind of qualities, and it's very kind of deep. It feels very kind of touching, very moving in the way that you're being with it and what you're opening and what you're giving voice to. And at the center of it, it's like the feeling that there's something really important got left behind, that there wasn't the grieving together, and that you weren't allowed to grieve. Not that you weren't allowed to grieve, but it wasn't permission. There wasn't permission in the field, like with you and your mom.
And you want to grieve with the people who are sad with you.
Yeah, right. And there's something about that coming up now, like in this point in your life where you are now, there's something coming up about that. And going with a feeling of a certain lack of happiness or joy in life that you used to be able to tap into, but there's something about that now.
Yeah. And I mean, I think part of it, well, probably several things. Moving forward with the separation with Paul, and I feel like we still sort of haven't, I mean, I've been thinking about it for a long time and wanting to feel the sadness of it, but I feel like it hasn't been really expressed. I think I started with wanting the divorce and putting it in a safe way of doing it for him, but also because I didn't know what would happen. And I think there is a fear there, because when my mom asked for a divorce from my dad, that's when he took his life.
Oh, right.
And I'm moving through that, but also just the things that have happened with Paul. He stopped drinking and things, but hoping that wouldn't happen, that it wouldn't trigger, and I realize I'm making it safe for other people, but am I making it safe, which is good, but making it safe for me, and expressing, what I need to express. And there's also this new found, it's a strange, I'm been doing some really great film work. I feel like I've actually found this sort of niche. I'm doing these profiles on people, and I love it. And things are really moving forward, but there's also this sense of, oh my God, I'm almost 60. Am I going to be able to keep this up? Because it's such a, it's not just writing or painting by yourself. It takes an enormous amount of energy and collaboration. And so, and I'm like, oh God, why didn't this happen when I was, 30 years ago when I had, but it is what it is, and I feel so grateful and lucky, but also, there's a part of me like, oh, if this doesn't work out again, am I going to have to go back and do a job I don't like very much so that I can get through until retirement? And, I've always sort of, stitched a living together somehow, but I think that's what, there's just a lot of change and things that are happening right now. So, and I guess part of this is, I don't want to leave that I do so much that I just sort of not in, be with what I'm really feeling,
Yes, I mean, that makes so much sense that you would also feel so delicate around Paul, given your stepdad. I mean, that makes so much sense that it would be so tricky there to separate, and to the way you've been looking after him in that way. But as you say, there's been a way that there's been a lot of thought and care and energy put into making it safe for him and making it safe for other people, but not necessarily for yourself. And here you are, you found your niche, you found your place in filmmaking, and it's like, oh shit, am I going to be able to have the energy? Am I going to be able to have the resources? Well, what about me? Now that I found it, how am I going to do that? And a really something coming together right now in your life right now with the separation with Paul and where you are with your career. It's like, I need to look after myself.
Yeah.
I need to also slow down enough to be there for myself in this deep way. In this deeper way. Like, what about me? What comes there about that?
I'm really beginning to realize how busy I am. That I do things too fast and almost out of breath when it's not necessary. Because I'm sort of charging ahead to try to get things done. And my mother's very good at being busy. She's great at it. But anyway, and I think that's part of the reason, or part of her coping mechanism with, and she's she likes being busy. And it's what I've realized is that I'm sort of not in the present moment many times, and slowing down with the age to, you just have to sort of, you have to let go of stuff. Like you can't, it's impossible. It's like, okay, I can do 3 things today.
Right.
That's what I'm going to do. If I do anything else, that's gravy or the icing on the cake. But, and just like slowing down, in ways that, yeah. And that's a part of the self-care that that's some of it.
So it's, again, like with this point in life, it's that like reaching a certain age where we have to let go of stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just not possible.
Yeah.
So there's the self-care, and then in the slowing down too, there's like a shift inside. And you're at this point in your divorce and your separation, and you found your niche. Like it's all these things kind of coming together, and these realizations in your meditation about like allowing yourself to be held in the awareness, and all this, and this stuff coming up from childhood about ways that you learn, like we all do, but that you learn not to grieve, not to stay still with emotion. Like
that's actually really resonates. Like not to stay still with emotion. Like I'd either or do it so quickly that it didn't. I would acknowledge it or part, but I didn't stay with it. It probably is, and sometimes not even, yeah.
Right, so in a way it would kind of skim the surface of it, or just like a swallow, it would dip in and then come out again, and then off it would be, and then off it would go. So that resonating with and not staying with emotion, or not staying long enough with emotion. But again, let's just check in what comes up here about that resonance, staying with emotion.
Yeah, just I'm just feeling it and allowing it. I think also the being patient with it and kind with it, and
How is that, as you're just being patient with it and being kind with it?
Well, there's a part of me, and it feels like it's like in the back spine, that wants to still get up and run and do the like start
get
doing
moving.
things, get moving. And I'm like, okay. It's interesting.
So it's like you've got both happening, is that right?
Yeah.
Because it really feels like there's just like this lovely kind of dawning going on, or there's this lovely something going on as that's kind of being given space.
Yeah.
And the other one's saying, quick, get out of here.
Yeah. And it's like, or it's like just the like tapping on the door. Before it just grab my hand and run. But like, so.
Interesting. How is it having both?
Well, it feels nice to actually feel both and give space for it and say, oh, that's okay. I don't have to sink in one or do the other. Just, I don't have to do anything with them.
Right, you don't have to do anything with them, and it's just actually pretty cool to have both, to be able to be with both.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what does that do inside, or what's that like inside, that just that new kind of being with both and not having to do anything with either of them?
I think it's vacillating a little bit. Like, it sort of, it feels, okay, just allow it and be with both. And then there's this little bit of a fear that if I do that, I'll sink or something. I mean, I think that's the thing about doing the
Let's give a little bit of room to that fear. So it's worried that you're going to sink? Is that what it is?
Yeah, or not be able to get up anymore. Like, sort of that.
Right.
I'm trying to name it. I don't,
Like sink into the emotion, or sink into
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like sink in and lose yourself, or sink in and get stuck down there? What's the fear?
Maybe both. Maybe a little bit of stuck.
Uh-huh.
I think, wow. I think part of that is if I allow to feel my sadness or my depression too much, will I be like my stepdad or something that my sister did, is that like, will that happen to me if I allow my grief to be, do you know what I mean? Like, or I won't be able to get out, or I don't know.
Yeah. That sounds very natural that there would be that fear there. With such a big trauma of losing them in that in that way, that would be the fear at the bottom, or it would be in there.
Yeah.
Then maybe let's check that out. So there's that fear that if you sink down, that it could be catastrophic in some kind of way.
Right. Yeah.
Let's just check that out. Something really big and bad would happen.
And part of it too is maybe it's also about forgiving and like getting beyond the anger that they did that, and just like understanding that we all have these emotions and they can be sad and depressed, and people do different things with them.
In that fear, like they're really going into that fear that if you go with your emotion, you're going to sink. Actually, what you find is something about forgiveness. And that we all have these emotions and we just do different things with them.
And I guess at that sort of deeper level, it's I don't have to find answers for it. For their what happened, it's or even try to understand it conceptually, just that it's yeah.
Right. The people are so mysterious. They're such universes unto themselves. But in that kind of realization and in that forgiveness, it's like, well, that's not your path.
Mm.
You going into that emotion, that doesn't happen to you. Something else happens to you. Something like that. So feeling how you're different. Then it's a mystery there, but there's a difference there in how you are with your deep emotion. You just check that. Does that feel right? What is it that's there?
I think like what people it's interesting about what people say about like suicide and other things about, oh, how could they do that, or why? And this is, we're going back to, is that they're sort of universes and lives into their own, but it's also, I feel like it's not even understand, like it's I empathize, I can be compassionate with that, those deep sad and sort of depressed states of mind, because I'm allowing myself now to sort of go and feel those, because they're a part of me as well. And but I know, even though that sort of scares me, that there's something that I do reach out to people. I do want life. I want to find joy. I want, there's yeah.
But you also have your version of that depression and that deep sad, but there's a difference with you in that you do want life and you do reach out, and there's a whole different thing there for you. And you can be with those feelings and that grief and that sad, and something catastrophic isn't going to happen. That you can actually do it, and do it in such a beautiful way too. I mean, it's so incredibly touching being with you in it.
Yeah, and I thank you for letting me share that, because I feel like that's what I need to do, share more. In a deeper way.
Right. Yeah, share more and let people in too.
Yeah.
You're going to feel so included.
Yeah.
a lot of kind of courage to go that deep with yourself.
Mm.
So let's just touch in again. What's there?
Besides my gurgly stomach. I do feel more grounded, and it's interesting. I really feel the weight of like my bottom part on this chair, and I actually feel my whole spine against the back of the chair right now.
Very grounded, really present, really there. So that's that very kind of grounded and present. And how about in here?
Just more. It just feels more more still. Just getting the image of a lake when it's just like really, really still.
Beautiful. Yeah, again, it's so lovely being with you in this too. I can really just get a sense of that lake and that stillness and that so kind of grounded and just such a lovely, very kind of natural way. It's beautiful. Yeah, so just letting that have all the room that it needs. And
It's so interesting that like the being present and being still enough to, these are very simple things, but being aware of my breath more, because I realize when I get sort of worked up or busy, like I hold my breath and I also grind my teeth a little bit and I can feel my jaw dropping. Like it's so interesting, like how the body takes on the state of mind.
yeah,
Yeah,
and I can just see it. I mean, as well as feeling it and being with it, I can see, just your whole demeanor is, just the kind of relaxation. I can see that kind of state just permeating your body. It feels like it's got a certain quality of light or a certain atmosphere as well. And there's that lovely kind of lake quality, and it just feels like there's a state. Maybe it's that calm. I'm just wondering how that comes for you.
Yeah, I mean, it feels so, it's just so interesting to feel the body does this high alert stuff, like just being aware of when like those states, and right now, knowing that I can come back, here.
So we're going to finish in just a couple of minutes, just checking anything else that needs to come, or just checking how all of that is. That whole thing at the beginning about, like, you know, the joy I used to be able to have when I was younger, and not, you know, feeling like this heavy. And I know that's been the kind of, like, we've been in touch with that theme all the way through, but maybe let's just, like, retouch on where at the beginning, and you were talking about the feeling of the heavy, and what that in your life at the moment, like in this new space. Let's just touch in on where we started. What's that feeling like? Or
But I think it's sort of what we spoke about having both things. I think at the same time I feel very grounded. And more steady, and like the like I feel like all of the other things, like joy and all of these things, can sort of arise out of this sort of state where I am right now. That was really interesting.
Right, so it's not about being joyous. It's about going to a place where the grief and the sadness can be allowed, and that something catastrophic isn't going to happen, and you're not going to disappear down there. And just like being in that and letting the awareness hold it. And then it's like a dropping all the way down into your body, and all the way down into your feeling body. And then, right, from that place, like this tranquil of lake, actually, this is where it all arises from, whether it's joy or whether it's grief, whatever it is. Like this is the ground where it arises from. Does that feel right? Did I say that right?
Yeah. And it's kind of cool, because before in my meditations I've had like these glimpses of this, but it's much more ethereal and one, but this feels very grounded in my body in
Really
a different
grounded.
way. Yeah.
Yeah, I can really feel that. It's like really, really here. Very palpable, very, very present. Cool. Okay. That feels like a good place.
Yeah.